In the fall of 1996, a shadow of fear fell over Arlington, Texas. What began as an isolated, horrific murder in September would evolve into a years-long nightmare that gripped the community in terror. The discovery of 26-year-old elementary school teacher Christine Vu's body, bound with duct tape and strangled in her bathtub, marked the beginning of a series of brutal crimes that would eventually be attributed to one man, Dale Devon Scheanette, who would come to be known by the chilling moniker, the Bathtub Killer. Welcome back to the Skyopened, a true crime YouTube channel where we dive deep in lesser-known cases. If you like what you see here, please subscribe, leave a like, and comment below what you thought about the case. The case of the Bathtub Killer represents one of the most disturbing chapters in Texas criminal history, not only for the brutality of the crimes committed, but also for the length of time the perpetrator remained at large, continuing to prey upon unsuspecting women. For nearly 4 years, residents of Arlington and surrounding communities lived in fear as investigators struggled to identify the person responsible for these heinous acts. The case would ultimately reveal significant insights into criminal investigation techniques, the evolution of forensic science, and the psychological profile of a serial predator. This analysis delves deep into the case that terrorized the Dallas-Fort Worth-Arlington metropolitan area in the late 1990s. It examines the lives of the victims, the meticulous investigation that eventually led to Scheanette's capture, the legal proceedings that followed, and the lasting impact these crimes had on the community and the criminal justice system. By exploring the psychological aspects of Scheanette's behavior and the investigative challenges faced by law enforcement, this analysis aims to provide a comprehensive understanding of a case that continues to resonate in the annals of Texas criminal history. The story of the Bathtub Killer is not merely a recounting of gruesome crimes. It is an examination of how a community responds to terror, how law enforcement adapts to evolving challenges, and how justice, though delayed, eventually prevailed. Through careful analysis of court records, media reports, and first-hand accounts, this document seeks to present the most complete picture possible of a case that exemplifies both the darkest aspects of human behavior and the relentless pursuit of justice. Arlington, Texas, situated between Dallas and Fort Worth, was experiencing significant growth and development in the mid-1990s. Home to the Texas Rangers baseball team and the future site of the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, Arlington represented the quintessential American suburban experience, a place where young professionals and families could establish themselves in relative safety and comfort. The city's population had been steadily increasing, with new apartment complexes and housing developments springing up to accommodate the influx of residents. The Pear Tree Apartments, where both murder victims lived, was one such complex, a typical middle-class residence that attracted young professionals, including teachers like Christine Vu and Wendy Prescott. Located in what was considered a safe neighborhood, the complex represented the kind of environment where residents felt secure enough to leave their doors unlocked during the day, and where neighbors often knew one another by name. This sense of security was shattered in September 1996, when the first murder occurred. The community's reaction was one of shock and disbelief. Violent crime of this nature was not common in the area, and the brutality of the attack suggested something far more sinister than a typical homicide. When the second murder occurred just 3 months later, in the same apartment complex and with striking similarities to the first, the community's shock transformed into widespread fear. Local media coverage intensified, with newspapers like the Fort Worth Star-Telegram providing regular updates on the investigation. The term Bathtub Killer began to appear in headlines, a grim reminder of the signature aspect of these crimes. The moniker, while sensationalistic, served to warn the community about the specific nature of the threat they faced. As former Arlington Police Department Detective Tommy Lenoir would later describe it, the community wasn't experiencing mere concern. They were gripped by absolute panic. Residents of the Pear Tree Apartments began moving out, unwilling to risk becoming the next victim. Those who remained installed additional locks, formed neighborhood watch groups, and altered their daily routines to avoid being alone. The carefree suburban lifestyle that had characterized Arlington was replaced by a pervasive sense of vulnerability and fear. Christine Vu embodied the American dream. At 26 years old, she had established herself as a dedicated elementary school teacher in Arlington, beloved by her students and respected by her colleagues. Born to Vietnamese parents, Vu represented the success story of immigrant families in America. Hardworking, education-focused, and community-oriented. Standing approximately 5 feet 2 inches with a slender build and warm smile, photographs of Vu reveal a young woman with a bright future ahead of her. She shared her apartment at the Pear Tree complex with her boyfriend, Thang Chi Koo, creating what appeared to be a stable and happy home life. Friends described her as compassionate, dedicated to her students, and possessing a quiet determination that had helped her succeed in her chosen profession. On September 17, 1996, that promising life was cut short in the most brutal fashion. Koo returned home that evening to discover a scene of unimaginable horror. Vu's body lay in their bathtub, partially submerged in water. She had been bound with duct tape, sexually assaulted and strangled to death. The time of death was estimated to be between 4:30 and 5:45 p.m., shortly after she would have returned home from teaching. The investigation initially focused on Koo, as is common in cases where victims are discovered by intimate partners. Police noted what they described as discrepancies between his statements and evidence at the scene. However, Koo's cooperation with investigators, providing DNA samples, submitting to polygraph tests, and allowing searches of his vehicle without legal representation, eventually led to his elimination as a suspect. The murder of Christine Vu sent shockwaves through the Arlington community. Local schools held memorial services, and her students struggled to comprehend the loss of their teacher. The Vietnamese community in the Dallas-Fort Worth area rallied around her family, offering support while grappling with their own fears about the seemingly random nature of the attack. As the investigation proceeded with no clear suspects, Vu's case might have eventually faded from public consciousness, becoming another tragic but unsolved crime. However, events that would unfold just 3 months later would ensure that her murder remained at the forefront of both public awareness and police attention. The holiday season of 1996 brought no respite from the terror that had begun with Christine Vu's murder. On Christmas Eve, just over 3 months after Vu's death, 22-year-old Wendy Prescott became the second victim of what was now clearly a pattern of targeted violence. Wendy Prescott, like Vu, had dedicated her professional life to education. Working as a teacher's aide in the Mansfield Independent School District, she was described by colleagues as enthusiastic, caring, and deeply committed to the children she taught. At just 22 years old, she represented the beginning of a promising career in education, with aspirations to eventually become a full-time teacher. Prescott lived in the same Pear Tree Apartments complex as Vu, though it's unclear whether the two women knew each other personally despite their shared profession. What is certain is that they shared the same tragic fate at the hands of the same killer. When Prescott failed to appear at her family's Christmas Eve gathering, concerned relatives went to her apartment to check on her. What they discovered was a scene horrifyingly similar to the one that had greeted Thang Chi Koo 3 months earlier. Prescott's body was found in her bathtub, bound with duct tape, sexually assaulted, and strangled. The screams of her relatives upon discovering her body were heard by neighbors who called emergency services shortly after 12:20 a.m. on Christmas morning. The timing of Prescott's murder, during what should have been a season of joy and family togetherness, added an additional layer of tragedy to an already devastating crime. The fact that she was killed on Christmas Eve, only to be discovered in the early hours of Christmas Day, created a stark contrast between the holiday's associations with peace and goodwill and the brutal reality of what had occurred in apartment 1184 of the Pear Tree complex. The similarities between the two murders were impossible to ignore. Both victims were young women in education. Both lived in the same apartment complex. Both were found bound with duct tape in their bathtubs. And both had been sexually assaulted and strangled. The pattern was clear, and the community's fear intensified. If the killer had struck twice in the same location, would he strike again? The discovery of Prescott's body transformed what might have been viewed as an isolated incident into the work of what appeared to be a serial killer. The media began to refer to the perpetrator as the Bathtub Killer, a name that would stick throughout the investigation and subsequent trial. The front page of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram on December 27, 1996, prominently featured the case, bringing it to the attention of readers throughout the region. For residents of the Pear Tree Apartments, the second murder was the final straw. Many, like Mickey Randall, an Arlington School District employee, made immediate plans to move out, unwilling to risk becoming the next victim. Others installed additional security measures and altered their daily routines to avoid being alone. The once peaceful apartment complex had become the epicenter of a community's worst fears. As 1996 drew to a close, the Arlington Police Department faced mounting pressure to identify and apprehend the killer before he could claim another victim. Yet, despite their best efforts, the investigation would stretch on for years, with the perpetrator remaining at large and free to continue his reign of terror. The investigation into the Bathtub Killer case began on September 17, 1996, when Christine Vu's body was discovered by her boyfriend Thang-Chi Koo. From the outset, the Arlington Police Department faced significant challenges that would test their investigative capabilities and resources. The crime scene at Vu's apartment presented investigators with a brutal tableau that suggested a calculated, methodical killer rather than a crime of passion or opportunity. As is standard procedure in homicide investigations, detectives initially focused on those closest to the victim. Thang-Chi Koo immediately fell under suspicion due to his discovery of the body and what police described as discrepancies in his statements. Police spokesman D. Anderson publicly acknowledged this focus, stating to the Star-Telegram, "The boyfriend is a suspect. We have told him and he understands that." This scrutiny placed Koo in the difficult position of simultaneously grieving his girlfriend's death while defending himself against suspicion. To his credit, Koo took extraordinary steps to cooperate with investigators. He did not hire an attorney, despite being a primary suspect. He voluntarily provided multiple DNA samples, submitted to polygraph testing, and allowed police to search his vehicle without a warrant. His transparency and willingness to assist the investigation eventually led detectives to eliminate him as a suspect, though not before he endured significant public scrutiny. The crime scene itself yielded valuable forensic evidence, though its significance would not be fully realized until years later. Investigators collected DNA evidence from Vu's body, fingerprints from various surfaces in the apartment, and fibers that might connect to the perpetrator. The medical examiner's report confirmed that Vu had been sexually assaulted before being strangled, suggesting a sexually motivated crime. when Wendy Prescott's body was discovered 3 months later on Christmas morning. The investigation took on new urgency. The striking similarities between the two murders, same apartment complex, similar victim profiles, identical method of binding and killing, bodies left in bathtubs, immediately suggested a serial offender. This realization transformed the investigation from a focus on individuals connected to the victims to a broader search for a predator who might strike again. A significant breakthrough came when investigators recovered a fingerprint from a TV stand in Prescott's apartment. This physical evidence offered the first concrete possibility of identifying the killer, provided he had a criminal record, or his prints were otherwise in law enforcement databases. Unfortunately, when the fingerprint was run through available databases in 1996, no match was found. A dead end that would frustrate investigators for years. As news of the second murder spread, the community's fear escalated dramatically. The Arlington Police Department faced mounting pressure to solve the case quickly. They increased patrols around the Pear Tree apartments and other similar complexes, distributed safety information to residents, and held community meetings to address concerns. Despite these efforts, many residents chose to move away, including Mickey Randell, who told reporters she was leaving specifically because of safety concerns following the murders. The media played a significant role in shaping public perception of the case. The Fort Worth Star-Telegram's front-page coverage on December 27, 1996, brought the case to regional attention, and the term "Bathtub Killer" began appearing in headlines. This media attention helped keep the case in the public eye, but also created additional pressure on investigators who had few leads to pursue. Throughout 1997 and 1998, the investigation continued without significant breakthroughs. Detectives interviewed hundreds of people, including residents of the Pear Tree apartments, colleagues of both victims, and known sex offenders in the area. They revisited the forensic evidence repeatedly, hoping that advancing technology might yield new insights. The case remained active, but increasingly cold as months stretched into years without an arrest. Former Arlington Police Department Detective Tommy Lenoir, who was deeply involved in the investigation, later described the frustration of this period to NBC's Dateline. "You don't have fear, you don't have concern, you've got absolute panic." He added ominously, "He's evil. He's gonna strike again." This assessment proved tragically accurate, though not in the way investigators initially expected. While the Bathtub Killer murders remained unsolved, Dale Devon Scheanette did not cease his criminal activities. Between September 1998 and October 1999, he committed at least 4 more sexual assaults in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. These attacks, while not resulting in murder, shared certain characteristics with the Bathtub Killer cases. They targeted women living alone in apartments, involved sexual assault, and demonstrated a similar level of planning and control. The critical breakthrough in the case came in 1999, but through an unexpected channel. Scheanette was arrested for burglarizing a car audio shop in DeSoto, Texas, a seemingly unrelated property crime. As part of standard booking procedures, his fingerprints were taken and entered into law enforcement databases. When these prints were processed, investigators received the match they had been waiting for nearly 4 years. Scheanette's fingerprints matched those found at Wendy Prescott's murder scene. This fingerprint match transformed the investigation instantly. Armed with this crucial piece of evidence, detectives obtained a search warrant for Scheanette's residence and collected blood samples for DNA testing. As Detective Lenoir later recounted to NBC5, "We got a search warrant, blood samples, and made a DNA hit on 2 murders. From that point, we started getting hits on other cases. The sexual assaults. It just snowballed." The DNA evidence confirmed what the fingerprint had suggested. Dale Devon Scheanette was responsible for both the Vu and Prescott murders. Further testing linked him to the 4 sexual assaults committed between 1998 and 1999. The snowball effect that Lenoir described revealed the full extent of Scheanette's crimes, painting a picture of an escalating predator who had managed to evade capture for years while continuing to victimize women. The investigation revealed that Scheanette had been living a seemingly normal life. During his years as an active predator, he had a girlfriend who, in a chilling twist, later told Dateline correspondent Andrea Canning that she had lived in fear of the Bathtub Killer for months and then realized she'd moved in with him, having no clue he was the killer. This revelation underscored Scheanette's ability to compartmentalize his criminal behavior and maintain a facade of normalcy, a characteristic often observed in serial offenders. Investigators also began piecing together Scheanette's movements and activities during the years between the murders and his arrest. They discovered that he had lived in various locations throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth area, moving frequently, another common trait among serial offenders seeking to avoid detection. His employment history showed periods of stability interspersed with job changes, suggesting a person capable of functioning in society while harboring violent impulses. The arrest of Dale Devon Scheanette in 2000, nearly 4 years after Christine Vu's murder, brought a measure of relief to the Arlington community. The Bathtub Killer had finally been identified and apprehended, ending his reign of terror. And on February 10, 2009, nearly 13 years after Christine Vu's murder, Dale Devon Scheanette was executed by lethal injection at the state penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas. When asked if he had any final words, Scheanette said, "My only statement is that no cases ever tried have been error-free. Those are my words. No cases are error-free." He did not apologize to the victims' families or acknowledge his guilt. The execution was witnessed by 6 relatives of Prescott and Vu, though Scheanette himself had selected no witnesses to attend on his behalf. He was pronounced dead at 6:21 p.m., becoming the 7th person executed in Texas in 2009. Thanks for watching. Please make sure to subscribe so you're always dialed into true crime cases. Also, leave a comment down below what you thought about the case.